Welcome to webinar number 4 in our series of 6 recordings. The goal of this video is to provide you with insights into the similarities and differences between oil and gas occupations and those involved in the emerging clean tech sector, and the transferability of workers between the two. The information covered in this webinar can be found in the Energy, Career Transition and Employment resource on careertransitions.ca. This webinar was made possible through the funding provided by the Alberta Government to PetroLMI, a division of Energy Safety Canada. The resource has been developed to address the labour market inefficiencies created by the downturn in the oil and gas industry. It shares the results of our assessment of the transferability of skills, knowledge, and experience obtained in the oil and gas industry into employment in the other sectors in our evolving economy. Employers can use the resource to better understand how they can fill their hiring requirements with the skills and experience in the available oil and gas talent pool. Job seekers and the career and employment practitioners that support them can use the resource to determine the best path to employment in our transitioning economy. I'd like to begin by providing some background on the evolution taking place within Canada's oil and gas industry and what it means for the emerging clean tech sector. The reason the energy industry is evolving is because it has to. Technology, and specifically horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, has fundamentally changed the industry's ability to access oil and gas. So much so that in 2014, an abundance of supply triggered a rapid decline in oil prices. This structural shift in the supply-demand balance remains today. For Canada's industry, the unlocking of previously inaccessible oil and gas reserves by the United States meant our primary customer no longer needs as much of our resources. While global demand for oil and gas is growing, those markets are in developing countries, such as Asia, and our infrastructure has been built to supply the U.S. Layered on top of the shifting supply-demand dynamics are some of the world's most robust stakeholder and Indigenous engagement processes, strict environmental regulations, and increasing expectations from investors to decarbonize. The combination of these factors is driving the need for Canada's industry to fundamentally change its business model in order to sustain. Leveraging the Internet of Things and technology solutions offered by Industry 4.0 is an opportunity for industry to increase its competitiveness from both a cost and carbon perspective. These shifts are not unique to the oil and gas industry. Agriculture, forestry, mining, and chemical manufacturing are all examples of other industries undergoing some similar shifts. Engaging in new ways of doing business is driving new activities and expanding the energy industry's ecosystem and the skills, occupations, and service providers required. Activities are directly related to providing solutions to industry's key concerns of cost competitiveness and profitability. This includes increasing productivity while reducing cost, and this has an impact on the workforce. Decarbonizing and reducing its environmental footprint, enhancing company performance, and continuing to create value through environmental, social, and governance practices, expanding domestic and international markets to reduce reliance on the U.S. as a customer, and finally, finding ways to accelerate technological solutions wherever possible. Canada's evolving energy industry is driving emerging sectors. Directly related to the topic of this webinar is industry's investment and activities related to increasing carbon competitiveness and reducing its environmental footprint, essentially driving the development of Canada's clean tech sector. Clean tech can be defined as the application of environmentally sustainable technologies to extract and process non-renewable energy that supports a low-carbon environment. In addition, we know that industry's efforts to decarbonize are also driving growth in the high-tech and renewable energy sectors, and also industrial construction and maintenance, as some carbon solutions require infrastructure. Going forward, the evolving energy industry is expected to continue to rely heavily on contracted service providers to drive cost, environmental, and safety performance. Oil and gas service companies have always played a significant role in researching, developing, and implementing solutions that lead to a more efficient, environmentally responsible, and safe industry. While the sector is currently struggling, we believe that once the oil and gas industry achieves some stability, it will be the service companies that will be called upon to apply their existing expertise and skills to traditional activities as well as emerging technologies and energy sources. We are starting to see this within the geothermal energy, carbon capture usage and storage, and methane emissions reduction spaces. The oil and gas services sector hires the greatest number of jobs for traditional oil and gas activities. We believe it will continue to do so in the expanded ecosystem required to support an evolving industry. For more information on the important role of the oil and gas services sector in our future energy economy, listen to the webinar entitled The Evolving Energy Ecosystem and Its Impact on the Oil and Gas Services Sector. The oil and gas industry's involvement in clean tech research, innovation, and adoption is important given its contribution to national GHG emissions. According to the Clean Resources Innovation Network, or CRIN, Canada's oil and gas industry is the greatest investor in clean tech. It is also the most prolific piloter of clean technologies. But we also know that one size does not fit all, and there is no silver bullet technology to realize the reduction in emissions required. Rather, it will take a number of different technologies applied across a variety of assets. Canada's oil and gas industry cannot do it alone either. Many of the clean technologies being developed are appropriate for other heavy emitting industries, and international markets hold great potential for Canadian clean technologies. The clean tech sector has been assessed as having a medium to high transferability for oil and gas workers. The methodology used for assessing the transferability of workers from the oil and gas sector into another sector is based on 3 criteria. The first is technical transferability, which looks at similarities between core qualifications, certifications, technical knowledge and skills, as well as business processes, use of equipment and technology, the type of regulatory environment involved, as well as similarities in customer and stakeholders. Nature of work transferability looks at the similarities in work arrangements, workplace culture, relationships, and environment. And finally, value proposition transferability is about the likelihood of a worker accepting an employment offer based on factors such as total compensation, location of work, career development opportunities, and values. For each of the criteria, transferability is rated as high, medium, or low. It's also important to recognize that this transferability assessment has been done at a sector-to-sector level. Any individual worker may bring a different set of skill sets that could improve their transferability into another sector. For a more robust explanation of the sector transferability methodology used for the Energy Career Transition and Employment Resource, please watch the video titled How It Works, Sector and Occupational Transferability. Now let's take a closer look at our assessment of transferability between oil and gas and clean tech across the 3 criteria. We've assessed technical transferability to be high. The technical nature of clean tech means the industry will employ a number of engineers, geoscientists, and technologists, and oil and gas domain knowledge will be of value. A key difference from a technical perspective will be how that technical knowledge and expertise is used to frame the problem and think about a potential solution in a different way. Developing and deploying clean tech is a problem-solving exercise, and the problem to be solved is carbon and environmental footprint. Currently, the regulatory framework for some clean tech is not well defined, and therefore the sector is likely to leverage the framework used for oil and gas. Therefore, those with experience with oil and gas regulations will be an asset. The clean tech sector will also rely on a number of core high-tech occupations, including software developers and programmers. Occupations working in the clean tech space will need to be comfortable navigating a number of technologies, using digital tools, and conducting data analytics. One of the biggest challenges for oil and gas workers transitioning into the clean tech sector is the transition that needs to occur from a nature of work perspective. As an emerging sector, clean tech involves a number of small startup companies that tend to work in undefined regulatory and business environments. Workers in the clean tech field need to have the ability to be comfortable working with a relatively high level of ambiguity that typically characterizes an emerging sector. This type of work environment can be quite different from what many oil and gas workers are used to. Also, in a small startup business, workers need to wear a number of hats and carry out a variety of roles. For example, your expertise may be in geology, but you may also need to be involved in marketing and be called upon to communicate a clear value proposition for your complex technology to a customer. Again, this may be different for those coming from companies with more structured roles. For these reasons, we've assessed the nature of work transferability between oil and gas and clean tech to be low to medium. Finally, we've assessed the value proposition for oil and gas workers to transition to clean tech as high. The sector pays well, and it allows those with oil and gas experience to apply their skills and knowledge to industry's environmental concerns. Many of the occupations required by the clean tech sector can already be found in oil and gas. Technology development and innovation will rely on those with strong research and development experience. Piloting and demonstrations are the most common routes to bringing a technology to commercialization and adoption, and therefore those with that experience will be of value as well. Workers involved in the deployment of clean tech are likely to maintain many of their core oil and gas responsibilities, but may require upgrading on technology, equipment, regulation, and compliance requirements. Clean tech has the opportunity to not only generate jobs, it also can sustain existing jobs by increasing the cost and carbon competitiveness of the oil and gas sector. The clean tech section of the resource focuses on 4 clean technologies. This includes methane emissions reduction, energy efficiency, carbon capture usage and storage, and well decommissioning, closure, and reclamation. However, this will expand over time as we add additional clean technologies, and we encourage you to visit the resource regularly. The resource also offers detailed information about high-tech and oil and gas and renewable energy, both which will play a role in evolving and decarbonizing Canada's energy sector. For each of the clean technologies included in the Energy, Career Transition and Employment resource, you will find an overview of the technology lifecycle or value chain, key activities, transferability at an occupational level, and the foot in the door or basic minimal requirements for employment. Now let's take a look at transferability at the occupational level for each of the 4 clean technologies included in the resource. The resource includes an assessment of occupational transferability using 3 types. Transferability is considered direct if core qualifications, knowledge, and skills are essentially the same. Similarities related to nature of work and value proposition are also considered. Occupational transferability is considered a refocus if some skill and/or knowledge upgrading is required to qualify for a position in a new sector. Finally, transferability is considered a reboot if significant effort and resources are required to successfully transition. In some instances, it may also be necessary to consider a relocation. Again, the first webinar in the series provides more in-depth knowledge about the sector and transferability methodologies used in the resource. Also, for job seekers and the career and employment practitioners that support them, a suggested starting point is webinar number 2, Starting with You, Exercises to Explore Career Transition. This not only assists with identifying sector transferability preferences, it also helps to prioritize the type of occupational transferability, direct, refocus, or reboot the career transitioner is best suited for. Occupational transferability is assessed at the level of specific clean technology. As you see by the amount of green, which indicates direct transferability, we anticipate that Cleantech will engage many of the same occupations as the existing oil and gas industry. This is not terribly surprising given that Cleantech in many ways is an extension of the existing oil and gas industry. A fair number of occupations require a refocus, and some require a more significant reboot. We encourage you to look at the more in-depth explanation of the life cycle, value chain, and activities related to Cleantech found in the resource. Remember, upgrading or upskilling to refocus into Cleantech is not just about your technical qualifications. It is also likely to involve refocusing how you apply your skills and knowledge in a different work environment and culture. Foot in the door or minimal foundational requirements for the occupations required by Cleantech is also identified in the resource. This information offers both job seekers and employers insights into occupational qualification, skill, and knowledge similarities and differences between traditional oil and gas activities and Cleantech. Understanding the activities that are more likely to result in an industry generating employment is an important consideration for a job seeker. Tracking activities that drive labor demand provides insights into the potential number and timing of job opportunities in a sector. The leading indicators of employment that we follow include investment announcements, government programs and/or other incentives for growth, changing regulations, and workforce demographics, as an aging workforce could drive job vacancies due to retirements. Timelines for demand can be found in the resource and relate to a reasonable line of sight from a job seeker perspective. We'd like to share some tips for monitoring Cleantech trends and jobs. Company guidance on spending is a leading indicator of activity and employment. As companies strive to decarbonize and reduce their environmental footprint, they are more and more likely to indicate within their corporate guidance spending on Cleantech, as well as what Cleantech companies they may be partnering with or technologies they may be implementing to achieve their goals. Like all emerging sectors, incentive programs that provide financial support to progress development will also be helpful in creating employment. Many of the federal and provincial incentive programs targeting economic recovery also take the environment into consideration. Recent and near-term regulations are environmental in nature and will drive Cleantech. The list provided on the right-hand side are concrete examples of sources and organizations we monitor to better understand trends and leading indicators of employment in Cleantech. The information provided typically goes beyond what you may read in mainstream media. In many cases, you can sign up for regular updates delivered to your inbox. Worksica is a bit of a unique resource. It is Canadian, and beyond using it to search existing job postings, as you would with other job boards, it also provides information on consolidated occupational, technical, and soft skill requirements, certifications, and what companies have been hiring, gleaned from historical job postings. Many of you may be familiar with a lot of these resources. Other than the specific labor market studies, many of them will not specifically spell out where the employment opportunities are or what particular occupations are in demand. That's where you're going to need to do some critical thinking. Key questions you can ask yourself as you're reading through the articles within these resources are, how does this information impact employment in this sector? How might it impact employment for my occupation? And is there anything I need to do to stay current and/or improve my career resiliency? Canada's oil and gas workforce was profoundly impacted by the downturn that began in 2014 and will continue to be impacted as the industry continues structural shifts. It is highly unlikely that oil and gas workers that have had their careers disrupted during this time will return to working in the industry in the same way. This means that most of the job seekers in today's labor market are likely to need to undergo some sort of training and/or skill development to increase their employment opportunities. In considering a transition to a new sector, we encourage job seekers to do in-depth research into the industry they're interested in. Learn more about the terminology used in the sector so that you can communicate your experience more effectively. The Energy Career Transition and Employment Resource can be helpful with this, but so can meetups, job postings, and webinars focused on the sector you are exploring. From the labor demand perspective, we are starting to hear that employers are unable to find the skills and qualifications they require. We encourage employers to learn more about sector and occupational transferability and the value of the oil and gas talent currently available. On this slide, we offer some suggestions job seekers and employers can take to better connect. Career and employment practitioners and trainers can play a valuable role in bridging the gap and addressing the labor market inefficiencies currently faced by our economy. The more we can increase the understanding of how the economy as a whole is transitioning and what that means for mid-career transitioners and job seekers, the better. Effective labor market transition will require short, flexible training that provides opportunity for career transitioners to gain skills and knowledge that complements and allows them to leverage their existing area of expertise. We hope you found this webinar informative. Others available include more in-depth information on our sector and occupational transferability methodology, a walkthrough of the Starting With You exercises to explore career transition, an overview of the evolving energy ecosystem and how it impacts the oil and gas services sector and its workforce. In addition to this webinar focused on the career transferability between oil and gas and Cleantech, we also specifically look at career transferability between oil and gas and high tech, and also transferability into the heavy industrial, construction, and maintenance sector. Our career transition work continues to be expanded, and we want to stay connected with you. Follow us on our LinkedIn page, Talent Needs for the Evolving Energy Ecosystem. This is where we will promote workshops, webinars, and other information helpful for effective transition of the labor market. Job seekers, we specifically ask you to take our survey and help us educate employers about Alberta's untapped talent. It can be found at SurveyMonkey or on careertransitions.ca. Finally, stay in touch with us via our personal LinkedIn pages, Pat Huffnail-Smith and Cheryl Knight. We'd be happy to take your questions, and we'd love to hear your transition stories.